What's up, Duval? It's your favorite Jaguar, Bucky Brooks, and this is Bleav in Jaguars, the podcast dedicated to all things Jacksonville Jaguars. And this was an exciting week for all the Jaguars fans and everyone around the team because it was the official release of the NFL schedule. And even though we've known the opponents from the end of the year, who the Jaguars were going to play, we didn't know how the pieces of the puzzle were going to slot together. So on Wednesday, the National Football League did us a favor. They dropped it off. They let us figure out who's who, what's what, where we're going, who we're playing, and all of those things. And let's talk about the schedule and how people within the building approach the schedule. When you work for a team, the schedule, look, it's significant in terms of like helping you prepare for what is ahead and those things. But as a player, the things that you look for are when are the primetime games? How many times do we have an opportunity to be like the main event where everyone gets a chance to see us? Monday night, Sunday night games. How many do we have? When are they? Because those things matter when it comes to getting recognition for awards, Pro Bowl honors, and those things. The Jaguars have a couple of them. They played the Buffalo Bills on a Monday night. They later in the season they played the Philadelphia Eagles. Two great opportunities for them to showcase themselves. So as a player, you love that. Players also want to know, when is the bye week? How long do we have to go before we get like a break to be able to kind of rest and reset and then focus? Ideally, you typically like to have the bye week in the middle of the year because it's a nice breaking point given all the work that you have to do to prepare training camp. Then the first part of the season, you like to have that week to kind of not kick your feet up, but it gives you an opportunity to kind of take the load off to get back on track and to go. And so the bye week for the Jags is in week 12. The last part of it that you're looking for when you're a player on the schedule, who do we finish with? You hear coaches and your team officials talk about the importance of finishing and playing your best football down the stretch. You want to play your best football in December and January going into the tournament. Well, the Jaguars have a nice set of games against division rivals where they might be able to build a little momentum going into the tournament if everything goes according to plan. From a coach's standpoint, when you get the schedule in your hands, you're looking at when the bye week. Okay, when do we have the bye week? How do I have to set up anything when it comes to where's the breaking point of the season? When you're looking at players and young players, if you had a young quarterback that you're trying to get in, normally the bye week is the week where, okay, this is where we can make some changes if we need to, because this will give us 2 weeks of practice without having to play a game and we can go. In the Jaguar situation, you're looking at a few things. You're looking at what does the opening stretch of the season look like? Who are going to be the first four opponents? A lot of time, given the landscape of training camp in today's time, you're still trying to get your team ready to play when you start the regular season. You're not necessarily game ready when you finish training camp, but you kind of work yourself into shape and work yourself into form the first four games of the season. Who do you play? How do you play? Where do you go? Those things matter. Coach also wants to know, do we have any West Coast trips? And if we do have West Coast trips, do we have any back-to-backs? Any things where, from a logistical standpoint, do we need to stay on the West Coast as opposed to come all the way back to Jacksonville, then go back out to the West Coast? Fortunately for the Jaguars, you don't have any of that. The Jaguars have a unique situation with the London games. When do the London games fall? Can we do back-to-backs? If we have back-to-backs, who are the teams? How does that go about it? Are we the home team or the road team when we go over there? So all of those things kind of matter, because what you have to do as a coach, you have to kind of plan out, how do I want to get the team ready for these, what we call milestone moments? How do I want to get the team ready for training camp? How do I want to get the team prepared to play in conditions in September when it's the hottest part of the year? How do I want to have the team ready to play at the end of the year? Do we have road games that are in cities that typically have inclement conditions? Are we going to have to worry about snow or rain or weather that could really impact the way that we play down the stretch? And in games that should be regarded as meaningful games, even though all 17 games are meaningful, but down the stretch, when we talk about those big moments where you have to win or go home and continue to keep the playoff life alive, you need your playoff hopes alive. You want to kind of have a good assessment of, okay, here's what we need to prepare. We need to make sure in training camp we do some of these things. I want to have all this mapped out, because planning is everything. the organization and structure that the coaches put together is everything because they never want to take their players off the routine because once they get comfortable doing things a certain way, you don't want to deviate from that. So let's dig into this schedule. Here are my first thoughts on the schedule. First thoughts when I first glanced at it, wow. Because when you look at the names and the names of the teams that are on the schedule, particularly early, a lot of heavy hitters, a lot of teams that we can talk about, like playoff teams, teams that have reputations for being physical or they're super fast and explosive. So the Jaguars have some things to get ready for, and training camp it's always important, but it's going to be really important that the Jaguars are able to hit the ground running given the first 4 games of the year. Let me preface this before I say it. Most coaches, when you're in the National Football League, you try and break the season up into quarters. And this is under the old model, but with the extra game, we still can kind of keep it the same. So under the old model, what you would shoot for is, hey, let's just go 3-1 every quarter. If we go 3-1 every quarter, that would put us at 12-4, 13-4, 12-5, somewhere in there. If you're in that range, more than likely, no, not more than likely, you're in the postseason. You probably win your division, and you're now vying for one of the top seeds on your half of the bracket. So by taking a realistic perspective of saying, if we can just go 3-1 every quarter, this will put us on track to be the team that we want to be down the stretch. Looking at the first 4 games of this season, 4 games against 2023 playoff teams, really challenging schedule right out the gate because you play on the road in Miami. You come back, you play at home against Cleveland, you play against Buffalo, and you play at Houston. Tough stretch of games against really, really tough teams. The first game, we'll talk about the Miami Dolphins. Now that you know that your first game is going to be down in Miami, even though you practice in Jacksonville and the heat is a factor, you just have to know, hey, guys, we have to get ready to go to South Florida. We got to be ready for, one, the speed that this team has. This is a fast team. How do we get ready for it? What do we want to do as we begin to think about certain things that we want for those guys? And how much will the things that we're planning for the Dolphins carry over to the Browns, the Bills, and the Texans, respectively, because that's the opening game. The other part that you want to address in training camp when it comes to looking at those first 4 games, okay, how can we build our training camp plan to really put us in a position to be playing and clicking on all cylinders when we get right to that first week of the season in September? So does that mean that we play the guys more? Does it mean that, hey, we play them less in preseason, but we ramp up joint practices? Does it mean that, hey, I want to take an old school approach where that first game we're going to play the first preseason game, we're going to play the starters a quarter. Second game, we're going to take them into the second half. Then the third game, we may or may not play them at all. Let the young guys handle it. All of that will come into play. And given how the team collapsed down the stretch, I would anticipate this being a very hard training camp. I would anticipate this being a very rigorous training camp. Doug has always run a pretty rigorous training camp because he saw it, one, as a player under Don Shula, but also working side by side with Andy Reid. Andy Reid believes in a very, very rugged and rigorous training camp because that is the way to get ready. You want your team to be ready to play while everyone is still trying to figure out how to play the month of the season. So the first 4 games of the year are going to be a major test for the Jaguars. Those 4 playoff teams, all are good. We can talk about the speed and explosiveness of Miami, the stingy defense of the Cleveland Browns, but you couple that with Deshaun Watson returning and what that offense could look like. They picked up Jerry Jeudy. Really, really challenging team. The Buffalo Bills are a team in transition, but their team has won a lot. It's a Monday Night Football game up there. It's tough. Having spent time up there as a player, I can tell you, man, it's nothing like a Monday night game in Buffalo. So readying your mind, preparing yourself for not only the conditions, but the environment, a very raucous, boisterous environment where you have to lock in. You may have to talk about using silent counts and those things. That third game is potentially challenging because it's a Monday night game, big stage against a team that knows how to win. And even though the Jags knocked them off in London, this is a team that should be a really, really good team because the quarterback is legit. They have new pieces around him, but they're morphing into more of a physical team that could use 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field. Just a different look, different way to get prepared. In that fourth game, the Houston Texans. Everyone is going to talk about the Houston Texans being the cat's meow. They now have to wear, I would say, the bullseye on their back that the Jaguars wore a season ago. Everyone is going to expect this team to be a really good team, and they're going to get everyone's energy. From the Jaguars' perspective, it's a great opportunity to kind of see where you stack in the division. This is a team that has really upgraded their personnel. They have a young quarterback in CJ Stroud, and you would like nothing better than to go toe to toe with the Texans, knock them off, and kind of see where you are to send a message to the rest of your division rivals. After that tough 4-game stretch, this is where I Bleav the Jaguars can really make a bump. Last year, they discovered this. When they play back-to-back games in London, it is a very significant competitive advantage in my opinion. The reason why it's such a huge competitive advantage for the Jags is they've been going overseas for the last like decade plus. They know the lay of the land. They know how to put together a plan that allow the players to be ready to play, having worked overseas. They also understand hotels and logistical issues that some of these other teams have to figure out. The fact that you have 2 games back to back, it gives you an advantage because your team operates on the body clock over in the UK. So rather than trying to make the adjustment in a quick span where some coaches say, hey, we're going to go early so the bodies can adjust. No, we're going to go later and we're still going to kind of treat it like it's our own time. The Jaguars really have an opportunity to get fully comfortable being on UK time. They get fully comfortable with the environment and playing in London. They played in London a ton of times. And so some of the things that are issues that normally affect teams on game day, cleats, grass, conditions, and those things, Jaguars have already worked through it. The equipment staff knows the land, they know the terrain, they understand what players need to wear. That's a significant advantage being able to go forward. And when you think about the Jaguars' record, the last few years they've been over there. 3 of the last 4 times they played over in London, they've won. Last year, 2-0, back-to-back wins against the Falcons and the Buffalo Bills. You begin to think about winning over 75% of your games the last few times they're going over there. That is a great opportunity to bounce back from a tough 4-game start to then picking up 2 games in London that really propels you into maybe the difficult, I would say this, it's the most difficult part of the schedule. And the reason why the post-London slate of games is the most difficult part is because you're facing 4 playoff teams in a 5-game span. And those 4 teams are the Green Bay Packers, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, and the Houston Texans. Coming out of those London games, I Bleav this is the most difficult stretch of the season for the Jaguars. And it's actually, I would say, the make or break stretch for the team. This is when we'll figure out if this team is going to be a legitimate playoff contender or will they fall by the wayside. After the London trip, when they have back-to-back games against Chicago and then the New England Patriots, they'll have an opportunity to play 4 playoff teams in a 5-game stretch. And those playoff teams, the Green Bay Packers, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, and the Houston Texans. Really good teams, physical teams that are also explosive when it comes to their offense. In the Green Bay Packers, you talk about a team that is upgraded. Josh Jacobs coming in, a former NFL rushing champ, a quarterback that is thriving, young playmakers abound on the offense, and then a new defense with Jeff Hadley that's going to be a little see ball, get ball, more vision and break. Big test for them. Then you go on Sunday night, Philadelphia at the Link. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. This team should be really good because they have really spent a bunch of money to upgrade the personnel. That was a team that started 10-1 last year. Huge test for the Jaguars on the road. And the last time the Jaguars went there, it was rainy. It was miserable. Trevor had a tough time holding on to the ball. This would be a big test. The Detroit Lions, another physical team. Last time went to Detroit and had to face them. Beat us up. I mean, just beat us up. Probably one of the worst losses that I've experienced since Doug Peterson has been back. Just never really had a chance, kind of overwhelmed us, bullied us. And then finally to play the Houston Texans again. The second game of like the series, and one that you really want to make sure that you can sweep them if you can, because that gives you significant advantages if it comes down to a tiebreaker and those things. So those 4 playoff teams in a 5-game stretch, which also includes a Minnesota Vikings team that could be starting JJ McCarthy, but they will have a defense that is really coming after you with Brian Flores, a lot of cover zero. This would be one that I would say would be a bit of a litmus test for Trevor Lawrence in terms of how far he's come over his first few years in the league. How does he handle that kind of complexity and kind of deception from a defense? Yeah, it's a really tough stretch. But if they get through that stretch, they go into a bye week feeling good about the team. They have an opportunity to reset. Doug Peterson typically does a really good job of getting the team ready during the bye to come out of the bye playing their best football. And when you have the bye in week 12, man, it's the dash for the cash. You have 6 games left on the season. 4 of those games are against division rivals. You talk about 2 games against the hated Tennessee Titans, who decided that in their schedule release video that no one knew what the Jaguars logo was. I'm sure that will make it down to the locker room as a little extra motivation to get them ready. But also the fact that the Tennessee Titans kept this team from going to the playoffs by knocking them out in the season finale last year. Being able to play that team in week 14 and week 17 is critical before you finish it up with the Indianapolis Colts in week 18. Depending on how the playoff race is, that could be a primetime game, that could be a 1:00 game. You have to be open for it, but you know that in the end, in week 18, you're gonna have to deal with the Indianapolis Colts if there's anything riding on your performance in the season finale. And who would you like better? Typically, this team always plays well against the Colts. It'll be on the road, not necessarily the given that it has been when the Colts have had to venture down to the bank. But this would be a really, really interesting matchup. And in between those 4 division games, you have 2 matchups. You have a matchup against the New York Jets. And if Aaron Rodgers is there, it'll be a different Jets team because look, 4-time MVP, that offense should be humming defensively. They get after it. But the Jaguars have had success against the Jets. The last time they played them up in the Meadowlands, handle them pretty easily, but they handled them when Zach Wilson was a quarterback. Might be a little different with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And right before Christmas, you make a trip out to Vegas. Can't go into casinos, but you certainly can take on the Raiders in Allegiant Stadium, a Raiders team that is going to be aggressive. Antonio Pierce is going to have them revved up and ready to play. They're going to be kind of physical and nasty and those things, but it's an opportunity during those last 6 games. I think the Jaguars can get hot. Like if they can kind of make it through the first part of the season, get to the bye week, and then take those last 6 games where you have 2 against Tennessee, 1 against Indy, and then you have the Jets and the Raiders. I think you take your chances. So that's the schedule. And here's my take on it all. My take on all of it, because people will say that the Jaguars are going to really, really struggle because it appears to be a tough schedule. But I would say if this team plays to the potential, particularly at the line of scrimmage, they'll be fine. If the offensive line holds up, if Cam Robinson, if Mitch Morse, Brandon Sheriff, if they hold their own at the point of attack, they'll be okay. If Trevor Lawrence takes the next step in his development as an elite quarterback, plays at a top 6, top 7 quarterback level, Jaguars will be fine because they're talented enough to be able to compete. The big thing will be on the other side, particularly those first 4 games of the season against a dynamic offense in Miami, a really intriguing offense in Cleveland, and then a quarterback that is out of this world in Josh Allen and CJ Stroud. How quickly can the defense adapt to Ryan Nielsen's teaching? When they make the changeover from a 3-4 to a 4-3, how long does it take them to pick up the system? How long does it take for the main players to be comfortable within the system? And can they play the kind of ball that they played, would have been able to create turnovers and eliminate big plays while adapting to a new defensive play caller? To me, that's probably the number one objective in training camp. Get this team on the same page on defense. Make sure that they're up to the standard when it comes to physicality and toughness. They're giving great effort. And then on offense is just better overall execution, eliminating the turnovers and just really playing fast, but playing fast and efficient so that everyone is really able to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. I may be a little more optimistic than most, but I expect this not only to be the 3rd straight winning season for the Jaguars, but I expect this to be what we thought it would be last year, where this team takes the division, this team plays at a high level down the stretch, and they finally make some noise in the postseason. We'll see. There's a lot of time from OTAs to week 18 of the regular season. But, man, we're certainly excited because now we have a roadmap. We can put together plans. Doug Peterson and the staff can make sure that this team is ready to play. and we have an opportunity to watch it play out right in front of us. So that's the podcast for the day. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Give it look. Tell a friend. Make sure we expand the community, bring more people in to listen to Bleav in Jaguars. Also, make sure you check Bleav in Jaguars out on the Bleav network on Fubu. Also, make sure that you have other friends with other teams. Check out the other podcast that Bleav is offering that represents all teams. So until I talk to you again next week I'll be at OTA. So now we have a bird's eye view on what's going on down there in Duval. So until next week, I'm Bucky Brooks. I'll see you next time.